All right, so get this. We're diving deep into Proverbs today.
Proverbs.
Yeah, Proverbs. But, like, not the boring Sunday school version. We're talking
Yeah.
about, like, the ultimate adulting guide, hidden in plain sight.
Interesting. I'm curious to see what you found.
Well, we're using this book, The Complete Guide to the Book of Proverbs, and it's blowing my mind how relevant this stuff still is today.
I bet. People have been turning to Proverbs for practical advice for, well, thousands of years.
Right, so let's just jump in. First things first, what does Proverbs actually mean by wisdom? Because, honestly, that word can sound kind of vague.
Oh, I totally agree. It gets thrown around a lot.
Mm.
But in Proverbs, it's not just about being, like, good in some goody-two-shoes way.
Okay, so what is it about?
It's about skillful living. Like, seriously, knowing how the world works, how your choices have consequences, and then using that knowledge to build a good life.
So it's like strategy, but for life.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
Cervantes, the Don Quixote guy, he called Proverbs short sentences based on long experience.
Uh-huh. So it's like tapping into generations of wisdom, kind of like a cheat sheet.
A cheat sheet for life.
Right.
Precisely. And one of those fundamental ideas in Proverbs is this thing about the fear of the Lord.
Oh, that sounds intense, like fire and brimstone stuff.
Not exactly. Fear here is more about deep respect and awe, like recognizing there's a higher authority, a moral compass.
So less about being scared and more about aligning yourself with the bigger picture.
Yes. And when you really grasp that, it changes everything. How you make decisions, how you treat people, even how you see yourself. It's the foundation.
The foundation of wisdom. Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. So how does that play out in real life, though?
Think about it. Have you ever avoided doing something, not because you thought it was wrong, but because you were worried what others would think?
Oh, all the time, or like afraid of getting in trouble.
Right. That's external motivation. But the fear of the Lord, that's internal. It's about doing what you know is right, even when it's hard.
Deep stuff. It's like doing the right thing even when no one's watching, right?
Yeah.
Which reminds me, Proverbs has a lot to say about listening to your parents.
Oh, yeah, that one.
And I know some people listening were like, parents, whatever. But Proverbs isn't saying obey blindly, no questions asked. It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. It's saying your parents have been where you are, and they've also lived through the stages of life you're heading towards.
So they have a roadmap of the terrain, Like they can see the pitfalls and wrong turns.
Exactly. It's like they're battle-hardened sergeants guiding new recruits through a jungle. They know the shortcuts, the booby traps.
I love that analogy, ancient wisdom, but suddenly it's so relatable. What about you, listeners? What's the best advice your parents ever gave you? The kind that made you roll your eyes at the time, but then, bam, they were right.
I bet there are some great stories out there.
For sure. And speaking of knowing who to listen to, Proverbs is full of advice on choosing your friends wisely.
Oh, yeah. It's like having a radar for those toxic types who might lead you astray.
The drama queens, the gossips.
Spot on. Proverbs warns against people who make fun of sin. Those who gossip have a quick temper, easily influenced. It's all about spotting those red flags.
That's so true, especially with social media these days. Like, are we letting ourselves be influenced by stuff that's actually harmful just because it seems cool?
That's the question, isn't it? And that fear of the Lord idea comes back in.
Yeah.
It's about seeing the real harm, not just avoiding things because they're uncool.
It's about choosing what's truly good, even if it means going against the flow. Okay, now for the really cool part. Proverbs gives advice on how to use your body for wise living.
It does. It's almost like ancient somatic therapy, the idea that your mind and body are totally connected.
Somatic therapy, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, so Proverbs talks about paying attention to your eyes, ears, mouth, even your feet, each representing different aspects of wise living.
Wow. Okay, so Proverbs is saying our body is a tool for wisdom. I'm into it. Let's break it down. What about the eyes?
Guarding your eyes against harmful influences. Think about it. What you look at shapes your thoughts, your desires.
It's like garbage in, garbage out, right?
Exactly. But it's not just about avoiding bad stuff. It's also about focusing on what's good and true.
Training your eyes to see beauty, truth, inspiration.
Yes. And that choice has a huge impact on your well-being. What you see can really uplift you.
I love that. Okay, so we're guarding our eyes. What about our ears? Time for noise-canceling headphones.
Maybe sometimes. But it goes deeper. It's about being picky about who we listen to.
Makes sense. We're bombarded with so many opinions, advice, information.
And if we're not careful, we end up believing things that aren't true or going down the wrong path.
True, true. And that fear of the Lord thing, it applies here too. It's about choosing to listen to voices that align with truth.
Exactly. It's like tuning into the right frequency.
Okay, eyes, ears. What's next on our wisdom tour?
The mouth. And let me tell you, Proverbs has a lot to say about the power of words.
No kidding. We've all experienced, like, the sting of hurtful words, or maybe regretted something we've said.
Oh, for sure. We've all been there. And Proverbs reminds us our words can build up or tear down. They can bless or curse. They can spread truth or lies.
Powerful stuff. But it's not just about avoiding negative speech, right? It's also about...
Using our words for good.
Exactly.
Speaking truth, kindness, encouragement. Proverbs reminds us our words can literally bring life and healing, offer guidance, build bridges between people.
Building bridges. I love that. It's like that verse, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver.
Beautiful, right? It's about using our words with intention, with grace.
And man, is that relevant today with all the texting, tweeting, posting. Are we really using our words wisely?
That's the question, isn't it?
Big time. All right, we've done eyes, ears, mouth, anything left. Our feet, maybe.
You got it. Proverbs reminds us to be mindful of where we go, literally and figuratively. Ponder the path of your feet, it says. Make sure your ways are established.
So watch our step, but also make wise choices about the direction of our lives.
Exactly. Choosing paths that lead to life, to truth. And remember, the people we surround ourselves with, the places we choose to be.
It all has an impact, like having a good map and compass and good people to travel with. Speaking of journeys, one of the biggest is marriage and Proverbs. Well, it has a lot to say about that too.
A lot. Starting with choosing the right partner. That's a decision that can change everything.
And I gotta point out, Proverbs gets pretty specific, like a whole chapter describing the ideal wife.
Oh yes, the Proverbs 31 woman.
But for the ideal husband,
Man.
way more chapters devoted to that.
That's true. But I think the point is, the whole book, if you really live it out, shapes men into the kind of husbands anyone would want.
So it's less about a checklist and more about embodying wisdom in every area.
Exactly. But there are verses specifically about husbands too. Valuing your wife highly, trusting her, praising her, being content with her love.
It's like choose wisely and be the kind of spouse worth choosing, which is a high bar. But hey, maybe that's the point of this whole wisdom thing.
Maybe it is. Welcome back to Proverbs. Ready for more wisdom.
Totally. Last time we were talking about marriage, being a good spouse. We even touched on that Proverbs 31 woman passage. I gotta be honest, that one always kind of intimidates me. Like, that's an impossibly high standard, right?
I hear you. A lot of people feel that way. But remember, it's not meant to be like a literal checklist.
It's not a recipe for perfection.
Nope. It's more a poetic portrait of a woman who just embodies wisdom in every area.
Okay, so striving for excellence, not perfection. Makes sense. But I'm curious, where's the equivalent for men? We joked about all those chapters on the ideal husband earlier.
Right. But that's part of it, I think. The whole book of Proverbs, if you really live it out.
It shapes men into the kind of husbands anyone would want.
Exactly. It's about being that person, living wisely. But there are verses specifically about husbands. Valuing your wife, trusting her, praising her, being content with her love.
Choose wisely and be the kind of spouse worth choosing, right? Which is, a high bar. Okay, so marriage. But what about kids? Raising a family. Proverbs has some strong opinions about that, especially discipline.
Oh yeah, it does. And it's not afraid to talk about correction, even physical discipline if needed.
I know that's a touchy subject these days, but Proverbs emphasizes that the goal is to correct, not to punish.
Absolutely. It's about helping kids learn from mistakes, grow into responsible adults.
So tough love with a purpose.
You got it. Proverbs talks about removing foolishness, even saving their soul. It's about leading them towards a life of wisdom and joy.
That makes sense. Not about hurting them, but guiding them towards what's good for them. Discipline is just one part, though. Proverbs also talks about providing for your family, and that brings us to work. I was surprised how much it talks about success in the workplace.
Right, it's almost like an ancient career guide.
Is it all about, like, climbing the ladder, though?
Not really. It's about diligence, skill, strong work ethic, but also being a good person while you're doing it.
Being fair, just, compassionate.
Exactly. It's not just about hitting your own obedient goals, but making a positive difference.
Which goes back to that fear of the Lord idea, right? Higher
Right.
standard than just getting ahead.
It all connects.
Yeah.
And that brings us to something else Proverbs talks about a lot, the power of speech.
Oh, yeah. Something we forget these days. We're so quick to text, post without thinking.
It's easy to forget words have weight, have consequences. Proverbs reminds us that they can build up or tear down, bless or curse.
Mm.
Lying is even called an abomination to God.
Strong words.
Yeah.
And it warns against gossip, flattery, speaking without thinking.
But it's not all, don't do this, don't do that. It's also about using our words for good.
Right, right. So what does it say? Like, how should we be talking?
Speaking truth, kindness, encouragement. You know, those words that bring life, healing, guidance, words that build bridges.
Building bridges with our words. Man, I love that.
It's beautiful. And it reminds me of that verse, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver. It's about timing, thoughtfulness, grace.
So Proverbs is basically an ancient guide to mindful communication.
I think so. It's about awareness, intention, just like we talked about guarding our eyes.
We also need to guard our ears. Be careful about what we let ourselves hear.
Absolutely. Stay away from the complainers, the gossips, the negativity.
It's like noise pollution for the soul. We have to be intentional about who we're with, what conversations we're part of.
Exactly. And speaking of being intentional, and maybe this is a good place to pause, we've covered a lot. Marriage, family, work, the power of words.
Whew, we have. But we're not done yet. There's still more wisdom to uncover in Proverbs. Things like wealth, alcohol, even riddles.
Right, welcome back to Proverbs, round 3. You guys ready for some more unexpected wisdom?
Oh, absolutely. Lay it on us. What haven't we covered yet?
Well, how about alcohol?
Alcohol. Interesting. Like, Proverbs doesn't shy away from the tough stuff, does it?
Not at all. And, you know, wine was a pretty normal part of life back then.
Right, right. So it wasn't like a taboo topic.
Nope. But Proverbs gets real about what happens when things go too far.
Oh, I bet. Like, what kind of warnings does it give?
Well, it talks about, not loving wine too much, not hanging out with heavy drinkers.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It even compares alcohol to, get this, the seduction of an adulteress.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
That's a pretty intense comparison.
And
It makes you think, right? Like how easily we can get sucked in by things that seem pleasurable.
But ultimately lead to destruction.
Yeah,
It's about thinking long term.
exactly. So is Proverbs saying all alcohol is bad? Like total abstinence?
Not necessarily. It's more about being mindful, weighing the costs.
Right. Thinking about consequences.
And, the New Testament talks about this too, like being considerate of others who might struggle with alcohol, not being a stumbling block.
It's about recognizing our choices affect other people, not just ourselves, which is kind of a theme in Proverbs when you think about it.
Totally. Okay, ready for another potentially tricky topic.
Hit me.
Wealth.
Money, money, money. Does Proverbs think it's evil?
Not exactly. It acknowledges that, wealth can bring security, resources, influence.
But there's a but coming, isn't there?
But doesn't guarantee happiness. It can't protect you from all of life's problems.
You can't take it with you. Right.
Exactly. And Proverbs warns against greed, that whole chasing wealth at all costs thing.
Makes sense.
It reminds us that true wealth, it's found in things money can't buy. Righteousness, wisdom, a life that's aligned with God's purpose.
So redefining what success really means, not just about the bling. Okay, now you got to tell me about these riddles. What's the deal with those?
All right, so they're not like, what am I riddles?
Oh, good, because I'm terrible at those.
They're more like observations of nature, but they contain these deeper truths.
So using nature to teach us about ourselves.
Exactly. There's this one about 4 things that are small but wise. Ants, rock badgers, locusts, and spiders.
What can we learn from those guys?
Well, think about it. Ants, they're hardworking, great team players. Rock badgers, resourceful and adaptable. Locusts, they plan ahead, work together. Spiders, incredibly patient, persistent in building those webs.
Wow. So in the lessons from nature, it's like ancient science meets philosophy.
Right. And each of those traits, they have something to teach us about living well. Diligence, planning, making good choices, working together.
Tiny creatures, big wisdom. I like it. What other riddles are there?
Well, there are ones about things that are never satisfied, like leeches and the grave.
Ooh, that's dark.
It's about greed, that endless wanting for more. And there's one that lists 4 things that are too wonderful to comprehend.
Yeah.
The way of an eagle in the air, a serpent on a rock, a ship at sea, and a man with a virgin.
Okay, that last one definitely needs some explanation.
It's open to interpretation, of course.
Hmm.
But it might be highlighting the mystery of certain things, like human relationships.
The things we'll never fully understand.
Yeah. And maybe part of wisdom is acknowledging that, embracing the mystery of life, not having all the answers.
I love that. So we started with the fear of the Lord, this idea of aligning ourselves with a higher purpose, and now
We're ending with mystery and wonder.
Full circle. It's been quite a journey through Proverbs, hasn't it?
It really has. We've
Yeah.
covered so much. Practical advice, deep reflections.
And I hope you've been inspired to crack open your own WN copy of Proverbs, see what you discover, because even though it's ancient, it's so relevant to our lives today.
And if you want to go even deeper, check out The Complete Guide to the Book of Proverbs. That's what we've been using, and it's fantastic.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
been a great guide for us. And remember, friends, the journey of wisdom, it's ongoing. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep seeking truth. That's what Proverbs is all about. Until next time, happy deep diving.
Did you get any of that?